I'm Bouris and this is Straight Talk. Hau Latukefu, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Relevancy is difficult to sustain in this industry.
It's part of Tongan culture anyway, with the hymns and the Tongan music, and record stores were hubs back then.
Yeah.
And you know, your Michael Jacksons and your Princes and your Madonnas, and then hip hop comes in. It's like, holy shit, you know, what is this? I gravitated towards that.
While cops are shutting down shows.
I worked with Onefour in the early days, and they are very proud of where they're from, you know, and sometimes that can cause problems with people from other areas. But for me, it was always about the music. You know, I grew up with music like that. We can listen to someone like NWA and we can disconnect, whereas some on the Onefour on your doorstep. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, hold on, this is actually quite real.
Hau remains true to the scene.
Yeah, Kid LAROI. You know, I first came across him as a 12-year-old, but you could see the talent. Like, everyone knew that he was going to be who he is now. Then you would hear his music and you're like, oh, wow, okay, like, this is something special.
All right, let's do it, Hau. Hau Latukefu, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Mark, appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Now, okay, you came into here today. What were you listening to in the car?
I actually called Uber.
Did you?
So, yeah, and they didn't have anything on, which I actually enjoy. Definitely better than listening to Carl and Jackie O, that's for sure. But I like silence, you know, just taking in the sounds of the streets and the motor and just watching things.
That's really interesting.
It is, because I think just from a young age, it's just music. I couldn't do anything, couldn't bust in to go to the toilet. I have to find the song to go to the toilet or have a shower and go for a jog. And in the car, it's always, but I think as I got older, I started to need to cleanse my palate. So I would just either play classical music or just silence.
You just said as a kid, your parents are Tongan.
Yeah.
They came to Australia in the 60s.
Yeah.
And you were born in Australia?
Born in Canberra. Born in
Canberra.
Valley Hospital.
Okay. And you're a Queanbeyan boy just outside of Canberra, like outside of the ACT. Why were you always having music everywhere you went?
Music was always a part of, I mean, it's part of Tongan culture anyway, with the hymns and the Tongan music. And so I was always surrounded by it. But then music outside of it, like the R&B and the reggae and you know, even pop, that was through my older sister and older cousins. And as you do as a youngin', you know, just follow, what are they listening to? Want to be like them. And so, you know, Michael Jackson was big, you know, Michael Jackson to Duran Duran to Bob Marley to, you know, anything. And it just felt good, you know, and until the day I discovered hip hop, and I just like, wow, this is talking to me. This is my generation's music. And I just head first in the music and the culture. And, you know, 30 plus, 40 plus years later, I'm still invested in that music and culture and thankful for it.
Well, you sort of had a career out of that, but also you built up a brand out of it as well for yourself. That Tongan upbringing, or the cultural side of your upbringing, how many kids in the family?
It's pretty small for a Tongan family. It's myself and my sister, older sister.
But then you would have cousins and
Yeah,
extended
my family. Like, I have hundreds of cousins, as a lot of Tongans do. You know, my parents come from big families. My wife's father, he's Tongan, and he's got a big family. And even, you know, her mother is white Australian, but she's from the country, so she's got a big family too. So yeah, thousands of cousins.
And so, and they tend to gather together. They tend to, and they're quite religious a lot of times. I mean, Christianity is usually a big thing, or church on Sundays, etc.
Very, yeah.
And of course, with that church comes the singing.
Yeah.
Sort of gospel-y sort of style of singing.
Yeah.
And actually quite beautiful.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to listen
Very,
to.
goosebumps.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
No, I've sort of experienced it. I've experienced it in Fiji. I haven't experienced it in Tonga. I haven't been to Tonga.
Very similar, yeah.
But it's like quite beautiful. And you see young teams, rugby league kids, for example, rugby union kids, after the game, they're going to start singing songs. And like, you're right, it gives you goosebumps. So that was what you were brought up with. Then all of a sudden you discovered hip hop, which is slightly outside of the territory.
Yeah, just a bit.
In terms of lyrics especially, or themes.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely. You know, you think about like you said, like religion plays a big part in not only Tongan culture but the Pacific culture in general. And so a lot of the music is based around religion and things that are happening in society. So what are things that are happening in society in the islands? It's quite simple. But then you listen to hip hop and a music that was born out of poverty and struggle and self-expression from the city of New York. And in New York and Tonga, total different, like opposite ends of the spectrum. So I think that was part of why I loved the music. It was just exciting, seeing these, like young African American and Hispanic kids in faraway lands in cities that were burnt out, but had this self-expression through music and dance. And I was just excited. It was dangerous. It was very anti-establishment. And, for a young kid, that's ticking all the boxes right there.
Were you getting any pushback from your folks and your older cousins and the elders in your family?
No, the older cousins were into it too. I got it through them. My parents have been always very supportive and understanding, my dad's quite a traditionalist, but my mom, she came to Australia to study to be a nurse at 17. So, and then put herself through uni. So she's quite progressive. So there's a nice kind of dynamic at home. So they are, they understood that we had to assimilate in some way, especially in the 80s in Australia, in a rural town like Queanbeyan. And so they let us take our own paths. Obviously have the guidance and the parental things happening, but I think a lot of the times, a lot of things I wanted to do, they were kind of like, okay, let's let him have his go, and then we'll see where this goes. So the music was, I guess they also saw that how happy that made me feel, and like, okay, he's all right.
So what was it that got you interested in the culture of hip hop?
Obviously, I couldn't relate to the type of poverty they were living in. In the 70s, landlords were burning down buildings that these people were living in order to get the insurance and things like that. So I couldn't relate to them on that level. But yeah, it was just the self-expression. And again, I think it was new and it was cutting edge. And
Yeah.
and I gravitated towards that. And it was, like I said, it was dangerous, and the music was just awesome, the rapping and the dancing, and I was just really intrigued by it all. And there was a level of myself relating to seeing minorities in a country, which I felt at that age, and that connection was quite strong.
Actually, that's interesting because around down Canberra way, especially being Tongan,
Yeah,
or being an islander, Pacific Islander, probably was a minority at that time.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not so much these days, but definitely was in those days. And we're going back to the 80s. Are we talking about the 80s?
Yeah, I was born in 76.
The edginess of the innovation of hip hop
Innovation,
probably
yeah.
really got to you a little bit by the sound of things.
Yeah, because at the time, new wave was quite big. Like your Duran Durans and your Thompson Twins, and they were quite elaborate with the hairstyles and the way they dress and even the production of the music. And then hip hop comes in. It's like, it's tough, it's rough, it's brash. Like the rapping is in your face, and you're just like, holy shit! Like, what is this? And that's what spoke to me. And yeah, again, it was just so exciting compared to your Michael Jacksons, your Princes, and your Madonnas, and it just was head and shoulders above for me. Than a lot of that music.
When you sort of explain that, I'm thinking, fuck, like all a bit too pretty.
Yeah,
And,
well,
and
even
I mean, cool, but just pretty.
very, very cool. And they're pop icons.
Yeah.
And even in the pop world, they were kind of cutting edge, but they were still very polished and $1 million budgets.
That's what I mean by pretty. Yeah, polished and shiny and popular.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, hip hop comes in as
these kids wearing like tracksuits.
Yeah.
Like and again, like tracksuits were what we were wearing at the same time too. It didn't really cost that much to wear a tracksuit. People would look down at you if you wore a tracksuit, unless you're going training or something. But
yeah, I can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can do that. I can't be Michael Jackson.
Yeah,
I can't be Prince. I can't be any of them.
Yeah, I may not sing, but I can rap.
I read somewhere that used to travel from Queanbeyan up to Sydney to go in record stores and just sort of troll through what's going on and get your head around it.
Yeah.
To explain that process.
Yeah, because I came up through an era where the internet wasn't a thing. It definitely wasn't like how it is today. No social media. Take 10 years to download one song, or to download a photo. You're like photo of Michael Jordan. You say, oh yeah, I think that's Michael Jordan. And I think one of our friends in a group had a mobile phone. And he's stingy with it, of course. So that in Canberra there was probably one Impact Records that was institution that would import records from around the world. That was really good. But then in terms of clothes or other music, you had to go to Sydney, and so I would save up my money, go like Murray's bus or Greyhound, and catch the first bus around 6:30. Travel 3 hours to Sydney, go shopping, records, clothes, catch the last bus back, get home by 10:30 p.m.
What would you do in the stores? I mean, like, tell me, like, what do
Yeah,
you do?
like we'll go to Central Records, which was quite big on Oxford Street there, and they had a big dance and hip hop section, and go there, grab a few Soul Sense, Next Level Records, and then would go to places like David Jones because at that time, it was like Ralph Lauren, Timberland, Nautica, these kind of brands, and only that place had it. So you would go there, and sometimes my mum laughs because I would go after Christmas for the after Christmas sales.
Boxing Day.
Yeah. And my mum would laugh because, she always thinks he's such a stingy boy with his money, and I would wait.
That's smart, dude.
I was like, oh yeah, but you'll still get a good present, just won't be on the day, and just have like 3 or 4 bags and chuck it back on the bus and head back to Queanbeyan.
But did you know what you wanted, or were you sort of go in there and sort of, you were one of those guys put the headphones on and you'd have the record going and you'd be listening to it first?
I was that too, but I used to collect hip hop magazines as well throughout the 90s, and so I'd be looking at it. Oh, who's that? Oh, okay, they've got something releasing this, and I would write a list of artists who the Cypress Hills, the Redman, and all these American artists that I couldn't get in Canberra. So I'd write this big list down, and then I would go to all the record stores and look it up. If I couldn't find it, I would ask them. And it was very, very exciting days. And like record stores were hubs back then.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times I do wish the young generation had something like that, that you would go to these stores and you would hang out there for hours and you just meet people. You heard about them, like there were graffiti writers or there were artists, and you heard about these people, but you never saw their face until they walk in and someone says, "Oh, hey, so-and-so," and then you're like, "Oh, what's his name?"
He saw my record.
Yeah, and you go up there and say, "Oh, hey, how, blah, blah, blah," and it was a beautiful time, I enjoyed that a lot, and it made me appreciate things a lot more.
So how did you get from being Hau the guy spending his Christmas money on and the sales in the record stores in the 90s, early 90s, to being Hau on Triple J? What's that story? What's that leap?
Yeah, it was a long process, especially going through a time where hip hop wasn't respected as an art form.
What does that mean?
Because a lot of times people think, oh, it's just a fad. It's just a type of music that people will love now, and then it would just fade away in a few years' time. But obviously, it became the biggest genre in the world. And so we just did it. Like we made hip hop music and, went to hip hop jams because we genuinely loved it. We were passionate about it. Whether there was 5 people there, 20 people, didn't matter because we were sharing this art form and the love for the music and culture. And so myself and there was a few kind of groups I belonged to, but then ended up with myself and another guy, Danielson. And
Is that here in Sydney or in?
No, in Canberra.
In Canberra.
And we formed Coolism. And again, there was a handful of artists at that time, and we just did it because we loved it. Regardless of being recognized by ARIA or being recognized by radio, we just did what we did. And as things kind of progressed, more people started getting into it. Radio started backing it, especially like Triple J, and they, they really started backing these younger artists. Also must mention community radio. Your 2SERs and things like that, who were always very supportive of the culture.
I just know from a business point of view,
Yeah.
Triple J might be slightly different, but to SER, they're looking at what's popular in that they want an audience. They're not going to put it on if there's 6 people listening to it. They might for a little while, but it's not going to last. Do you think they recognise you as someone who can bring the audience to them? It's a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I think that would be more so for the bigger radio stations, whereas the community radio, they were just focused on the arts and like what was happening and kind of just being invested in that. And yeah, and I think once Triple J started throwing a bit of weight behind like people like ourselves and Downside and of course the Hilltop Hoods, that's when it kind of spread out. And because there was only a few artists at that time, we became the faces of this new movement. And so Coolism, we did a lot of great records. We won the ARIA Award, and I was just one of the main faces for that movement. And Maya Jupiter was one as well, and she was the host of the Triple J Hip Hop Show before I was, and Nicole Foot was before her. And when she would kind of go away for touring or whatever, they would ask me, "Oh, would you like to,
Step in?"
Yeah, step in and see, And I was like, "Oh, yeah, why not? Play some music I love and get paid for it. Yeah, that sounds great." And then she decided to move to LA and asked a few people to submit demos, and I was one of them. And yeah, they chose me 14 years ago.
Community radio, and you talk about Triple J in particular. Sometimes I think about government-funded programs, which I think to myself they are a little bit of a indulgence for small groups, but that's what government does. That's what they should do, because they're the only ones who can afford it, because commercials are not going to do it. Today FM's not going to do it,
No.
or Triple M, God bless them. But then all of a sudden they did bring something into Australia for Australian audiences that already existed overseas. How important is that today? And is that dying off?
It's kind of difficult because hip hop was still relatively new and cutting edge at that time. And now you have many subgenres. Like, it's so many. Like, you can't cover all of them. But I do feel like there is a responsibility for, if you're a radio station and music is what you're doing, you have a responsibility to represent music and what is happening. Yeah, we can play the golden oldies and all that. I still love it. But I feel there's a responsibility to represent what's happening now, especially in Australia. I think a lot of commercial radio have a lot to do. Like, I understand it's commercial radio. It's in the title, commercial radio. It's played 50,000 commercials between 3 songs. I do get that, but it's like, man, we have so many exciting artists here that are doing well overseas, but you're not playing it here. Like, where's the disconnect?
Well, how does that work? I mean, because like, I just want to give you an example. I love jazz, I love blues, and I love jazz.
Yeah,
and so 89.7 is in our area. It's Paddington Town Hall. It's started off as a jazz only station. Didn't have much reach. But when I used to first listen to it like 10, 15 years ago, in fact, I started sponsoring it a bit because I just love the music. But now it's started to morph into talkback. There's talkback in the afternoon. It shits me.
Yeah.
Still love some listen. Saturday night, I love their show. Sunday nights, love their show. It was great jazz. But now they've had to change because they've had to get sponsors, because people they got to pay wages now. A lot of the people there were volunteers originally, but now they've got to pay wages. Do you think they're going to get the same chances to become as popular as what you grew up in? Or do you think they're not going to get the same chance to grow up, and because of the commercial importance of playing to audiences, having friggin' talk back and then doing other shit, you know what I mean?
But yeah, it feels like music is less of importance.
Yeah, sort of, to me. That's how it feels.
No, I feel you. And I would say no, but we didn't have the access to information and resources that this generation has now.
So there's other ways of getting it.
Yeah, like you don't, like I love Triple J, and a lot of people place a lot of importance on Triple J, and rightfully so. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but Triple J is not the be all and end all. It's not 1995 anymore.
It was.
It definitely was, and in certain ways, it still is. But we have the internet now.
Yeah.
And it's the same. We can talk about like record labels, similar. Like record labels still have an important place in the industry, but you don't have to have it. You don't have to be signed to a label anymore. You know, I mean, I have a label, but I also understand, like, you know, these kids can make a song in the morning, record it, upload it, do a video all in a few days.
Mm.
And whether it pops off or not, it's just another story. But that's just how easy it is now to be able to make music and get seen and heard. And you know, we can listen to a hip hop artist in Croatia that would have never had a chance to, you know, to go through the traditional channels that
Or never
we
going to get
used to.
played on Triple J because you wouldn't
Yeah.
have known about it.
Exactly. Now it's like, oh, what's happening in Portugal? Oh, well, okay, these artists are popular over there. Let's play that.
But audiences needed someone like you when you're at Triple J, because
Yeah.
you're not at Triple J anymore.
Yeah.
But when you're at Triple J, and for all 14 years, they needed you to bring the audiences to them.
Yeah.
So, in other words, you were the curator.
Yeah. That's it. It's a curator. Like,
You're the curator.
people say, like to use gatekeeper. Oh no, I hate that. I hate that term gatekeeper, because like I came up against gatekeepers in the 80s and 90s.
Well, normally gatekeepers trying to keep you out.
Exactly. Whereas I'm the opposite. I'm like the doorman at the hotel. I'm like, open door, come through. And, and curators are important because, like I said, anyone can become an artist, but then you run into the problem of anyone can be an artist.
Yeah.
You know, there's the quality control kind of gets a bit lost, but you do need people like myself, curators who can suggest, like, oh, okay, if you like this, you might like this. This is a new kid coming out of Fiji. Like, he's only got 15 followers on Instagram, but he's got a lot of potential. You should check him out.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that role of curating is super important, whether it's on radio, whether it's on a blog or a podcast.
Or even on YouTube. I mean, if you had your own YouTube channel,
yeah,
and you said, this kid, I don't know, heard him somehow in Fiji. He's 15. This is his background, but his stuff is gun.
Yeah.
And because you're good at following, people trust you.
Yeah.
They'll say, well, hang on.
Yeah,
If the king said that, he's into it. That'll do me.
Yeah, so, definitely.
But that's what you did at Triple J.
Yeah.
But now there's just a broader platform for you to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So because we all of us, which is why I used to love listening to, 89.7, which is Eastside Radio. I used to love Eastside Radio because they used to find stuff that I hadn't heard for a long time or I forgot about.
Yeah.
And they give you a bit of an explanation. They talk a little bit about the artist. They might talk about this particular.
I love that shit.
That's important to me.
Yeah. It's like liner notes when you used to buy vinyl. I was that kid, like, reading, oh, who was the engineer? Oh, they're sending shout outs to all these artists in Japan. Who's that guy? And I love.
And you can tell a bit of a story about them.
Yeah.
In terms of hip hop, how would you best describe yourself to the audience? What you're going to do for me?
I was just talking about this before. I would say it's a title my wife actually told me. I said, you're a cultural ambassador. I was like, what is that?
Yeah, let's unpick that a little bit though.
Yeah, it's like
culture. Which culture?
Yeah, and that's it. It's Tong culture, it's Pacific culture, it's hip hop culture, and I'm a representative of that, and like the hip hop delegate at the UN. That's how like
really.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I say, wow, the United Nations.
Wow, that wasn't in the notes. Like,
that's cool. I thought the United Nations appointing hip hop ambassadors. That's pretty fucking cool for the UN.
I'm definitely representing the Pacific Island community, and I always have, and it's always been, going back to my growing up. Like I didn't see any islanders on TV, like, besides maybe the one or two playing for, rugby league or rugby union, or they're on the news or, in the newspaper, and there just wasn't that representation. And I knew as I was gaining traction with what I was doing, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a representation of Pacific community in these spaces that we're normally not in or not even allowed or refused entry, and that was important to me. And then beyond that, it's hip hop, because we can talk about hip hop in those same spaces where, as I was saying to you earlier, it was looked at as a fad and something that, is going to be here one day and gone the next. And so I'm always representing hip hop culture. And those two cultures are super important to me, and whichever spaces I step into, I'm wholeheartedly representing that.
So, I mean, there's lots of parts of hip hop
Mm.
culture today. There's the gang style, like, the
Mm.
postcode stuff, particularly here in Australia.
Mm.
I mean, it's a bit hot in terms of, I don't mean
Red
it's
hot,
bad,
yeah.
it's a bit hot in that, cops are interested in it and all
Mm.
that sort of stuff. They close venues down, what have you.
There's definitely a lot more inclusive. It's interesting that hip hop was the minority music, and then it kind of turned into a very because it was always about inclusive, but then it was always very male dominated.
That's-
As with a lot of industries, but in particular hip hop, because it was always about bravado. Like, I'm the toughest, I'm the best, and those, traditionally like male traits, and the females or non-binary just never felt welcome in those spaces because it was always like the rough and tumble kind of genre and culture. But now it's changing, because the world is changing as well, and people, all different types of people love hip hop, and they want to use that as a vehicle to express themselves. So that is changing a lot, which is
So
awesome.
inclusiveness is a
Yeah,
big deal.
yeah, it's a very big deal.
What about, this is my tribe, this is what we're putting up with, you shit bags over there, like, what about that part? Yeah, what about that
I
part?
mean, that's always part of
Yeah.
hip hop, isn't it? Like,
I actually find that, I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Look, to
Yeah.
me, I find that exciting.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I know its potential can blow up and cause problems,
Mm.
but I actually find that pretty edgy.
yeah, and I mean, and hip hop has always been that. Like, it comes from certain parts where there is a lot of gang activity or crime or things like that nature. So that's going to appeal to areas everywhere around the world. And like you mentioned before, it's red hot here in Sydney. Because there are a lot of beef. There is a lot of beef between certain artists in certain areas, um, and it's spilled into music.
Is that competitiveness between the artists, or is it postcode versus postcode?
It goes deeper than music sometimes. I mean, I think now a lot of it is quite showy, and because everyone's a bit more in tune with what's happening, so now everyone's like kind of capitalizing on that just to get the views and
For popularity.
yeah, for popularity, because we talk about drill music, and drill is a genre where they're specifically talking about violent acts that did happen or is about to happen, and explicitly that's all they were gonna that's all you rap about. That has changed over the years. But yeah, like that, people kind of put on an act because drill is a popular subgenre, so people are just kind of jumping in and kind of toying with the idea, like, yeah, I'm from here, I'm from there, but it's not as lethal as it once was.
Have you got an example of something, someone who has a postcode in their name that you're curated, so to speak, or someone?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of artists from certain areas, and in particular Onefour, they're a group
That's
that
out west.
yeah, they kind of from Mount Druitt, and even though they are very proud of where they're from, and sometimes that can cause problems with people from other areas, but for me it was always about the music. I grew up with music like that, and so
Can you describe it to me?
it's very raw, very honest. A lot of lyrics are
Lyric wise,
yeah, a lot of lyrics are quite violent, and but again, I grew up with that. I grew up with NWA. I grew up with the Ghetto Boys and Snoop Dogs, and all these artists that have a similar story and a similar background. And but I think where Onefour is concerned is it's here, and that's what I think a lot of people were kind of a bit they're a bit taken aback because
or intimidated?
yeah, you know, because I think we can listen to someone like NWA and we can disconnect from that because, you know, the African Americans from the urban cities of LA, somewhere else, you know, and what they do is not really affecting us. We just like it because it's entertaining. Whereas some on the Onefour on your doorstep, and I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, hold on, this is actually quite real," you know, like, and you don't have to look far outside of their music to see, you know, who they are. You know what I mean? And I think that for a lot
That's
of
sort of
people,
exciting though.
it is. It's real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're not here to glorify the violence, but the music they make is exciting. And beyond that, they're actually great musicians. You know, they're really good at their lyrics and their rhyming schemes and the delivery and their tonality. You know,
I was a musician as a kid,
Yeah.
a pianist, and but classical.
Yeah.
But like in terms of Onefour, the tonality and actually the quality of the music as such.
I worked with Onefour in the early days, and when I first saw them, I was, you know, because a lot of rappers from those areas, there were in those days were, I mean, those days was like 3 years ago, and
Not that long ago.
yeah, not that long ago at all. It feels like 10 years ago, but you know, they were heavily influenced by hip hop coming out of LA, so it was very West Coast influence with the West Coast beats and even rapping like an American. And when I first came across them, they were rapping in their natural accent, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is automatically different."
No, you mean actually like Sydney accent?
Yeah, just their everyday accent, you know.
yeah.
And so that first off was like, okay, these guys are different.
Yeah.
And then I started listening to the lyrics, and I was okay, these guys are actually thinking about what they're saying. You know, it's not just your typical rhyming scheme. You know, they were like rhyming words that started up there and then end there, and they were really thinking about
Like good syntax
Yeah.
in terms of the way they were structuring it.
Yeah, you know, it wasn't
So
just
clever.
Yeah, very clever, and it wasn't your everyday.
Like a talent.
Yeah, you know, they, you know, because I think, you know, with sometimes when you listen to that music, it's more about the energy. But these guys had the energy and they were lyricists.
So this is more than just out of Compton.
Yeah,
Copy.
you know, yeah. He wasn't just, oh, I'm gonna do this to this guy,
Yeah,
and then, you know, they would really be specific with what they were saying, and then, you know, you talk about cadence, like how they were saying it, and you know, the timing of what they were saying, and then we talk about the delivery and the flow, like how they were doing it, and all these things were, you know, it was they still had a lot to work on, but it was there. You could see it.
How did you see it though? By the way, how did you first sort of
Yeah.
come about?
I first came, well, a few people like my man Ricky and another artist, Elijah Joe, said, "Oh, have you heard of this group Onefour?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And but said, "Oh, you should check these guys out." And so I went to YouTube and I looked at their music, and yeah, like I explained before, I was just automatically, the accent was the first thing. That's why I'm very strongly opinionated about, you know, we all know it comes from America.
Yeah.
But I always felt like if we rap in our natural accents, that automatically differentiates us from what's happening in America, the UK, Europe, Asia. And that's what happened with them when I heard them. I was like, okay, so they're rapping in their natural accents. That's awesome. And then like I was saying, there was the lyrics, the cadence, and the energy. And it was also the look. You know, like I think we always, you know, as hip hop, we kind of want to dress like someone from America. But these kids were like, they were dressing like they were from where they were from. You know, they had the little rat's tails, and, you know, they had their tracksuits and the way they looked. And I was like, yeah, this is it. This is Australia, you know, like, you know, a small pocket of Australia that's underrepresented. And I just fell in love with what they were doing. And I just reached out and said, you know, if you want to have a chat, and if music is something, because I knew there was a colorful history with the law. But I said, you know, but if music is what you're truly interested in and want to do in the future, then let's talk.
And I'm sure they reacted like, wow.
I'm not too sure, to be honest, like, because it was all like, you know, DM, so you kind of missed the context and.
But they wouldn't know who you were.
Yeah, I think they knew of me.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I'm not sure how much they knew of me. But yeah, again, you know, I talk about. People say, "Oh yeah, you know, you did a lot for Onefour," but I often say, "Yeah, but you have to give them credit too for listening."
Yeah.
That is the important part. Like they could have just said, "No,
See you
we're
later.
good,"
Yeah.
and I would have been okay, cool. I would have left it, and who knows if they would have been where they are today if they weren't as receptive. They said, "Oh, okay, cool, yeah, let's catch up," and they turned up on time and they listened, and that is, as you know, that's half the battle.
Do
Like
you
having
think they
people
sort
listen.
of looked like, how is it, the older dude?
Oh no, of course.
Did you get that?
Yeah, no, I'm like that. I've met some of their parents. I'm like, they're not that older than me.
Uh,
So that's always in my mind though, knowing that okay, I'm coming in. I think I'm cool, and I know what I know, and I'm in touch, but I'm still coming in twice their age.
Yeah,
They're looking at me like, okay, we know what he does, but he's not out here like us. He doesn't. How does he truly know what we're about if he's twice our age? And I always know that, and I always walk into these conversations knowing that and respecting that view, and that's why I've taken on mentor roles, and knowing who I am is important because I often think if I was in Onefour's shoes and this guy comes in like twice our age and starts saying, yeah, this and that, and you should do this. And I know I'll be thinking like,
who the fuck do you think
who
you
the
are?
fuck you, man?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you
yeah.
coming here like telling me who I am and what I should do. Like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, that takes a special skill though to be able to sort of build that bridge. I guess someone else, another one came to my mind is massive artist, Kid LAROI.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Kid LAROI. I first came across him as a 12-year-old.
How?
Well, actually, I saw him before. I first came across him, like I first met him around that age, but I first came across him on Facebook. I think like one of Facebook at that time was the organic reach was huge. You just
Yeah.
posted something and then everyone saw it. And one of his earlier videos, I think he was living in Adelaide at the time with an older gentleman, and there's these two guys and they're doing this rap, and I think he must have been like 10 or something, like super young, and he's not a big kid either, so he looked like he was 3, and but you could see the talent, like the way he was like Onefour, like it's not all the way there, but you can see the potential, and he's the way he's rapping and moving, and the energy of him, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a cool kid, and then he moved to Sydney, and it's a funny story that I share with a lot of people. Like I met him at I heard about him, so yeah, this kid he's going to be something, and I'm like, oh yeah, I hear that a lot. It's like football players, like
Yeah,
um,
totally.
and it was at Manu Crooks. He's another Sydney artist, and had a listening party for his album, and LAROI was there. And I walked in, I saw him, and my first thought was like, "Oh, that's cute." When someone's brought their kid,
How old was he then?
I think he was around 12,
12.
12, 13. And I was like, and he was, he's quite tall now, but he was short. I was like, "Oh, that's cute. Someone's brought their kid, and it's great. Give him the experience." But then he walks up and he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm Kid LAROI," and I'm like, "Oh shit, you're the Kid LAROI," and he just had that energy. He was everywhere. Even as an underage, he was just everywhere. He'd make his way into parties, into events, and always talking to people like, "I'm Kid LAROI. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. You should listen to this." And it, usually for me that puts me off. You're like,
Yeah, I've heard it before.
Yeah, I heard it before. I'm here trying to watch this. Like, can you just relax?
Yeah.
But there was just something very infectious
What is
about
that?
him.
What is that? I mean, like he had it. He had it.
Yeah.
What you look for.
And at that point, I hadn't listened to a lot of it. But I think it's because his age, you found it like quite endearing. It's like, oh, it's cute. This little kid's hustling. And then you would hear his music and you're like, oh, wow, okay, like this is something special. And I heard a few tracks here and there. And it wasn't until LAROI was with Onefour in the studio where I got to see him work. And I think, I'm sure he was 14 at this time. And he comes in and he just has that great energy. Like, I've only been in a room with someone with that energy where you feel like, yeah, this kid is something else. And I would watch him work. He'd be on the mic, do his bit, and then he'd go to the computer and, record himself and fix his auto tune or whatever, and then go back to the mic and then do his bit, then go back and he was just so confident and just had an infectious energy and he just knew like I mean, it sounds strange because when someone does something, everyone's like, "Oh, I knew that guy was going to be something," but everyone knew that he was going to be who he is now. But even now, when you see it, it's quite surreal. But you knew,
Still young.
yeah, and he's still young. But you just even now, you're kind of like, wow, that's that kid that was, and that. I mean, he was grinding for a lot of time, but then when he hit that mark, that just
Well, what was that? Do you think that sort of pushed him like beyond where he was?
Yeah.
I mean, he was going okay, look, impressive,
Yeah.
had that energy, all that sort of stuff. Next thing you know, he's selling out stadiums in the US, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, arenas, like
Yeah.
big, big, big. What is it?
Yeah, I do believe when he went to the States and he signed his deal over there and was involved with some heavy hitters that were connected with a lot of great talent. And there's only so much a major label or a team like that can do. They can push you and push you to spend all that money, but if the music is not good, it's not going to fly. It's not going to connect with people. So he just again ticked all those boxes that need to succeed. He had a team that was quite aggressive and well connected, and he just had the work rate and the talent. And so those two combined, he was just out of there.
The work rate, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You mean like in terms of being productive, prolifically productive?
Prolific,
Like just keep turning it out.
yeah,
all
like
the time.
just always just wanted to be in the studio, first one in, last one out. Like, I think there was a few times where people were like, "Nah, you need to go home, sleep. We got school tomorrow." There's been a lot of those cases for him because again, like he started super early, and you want him to focus on his passion, but he's still got to do what kids do. That's what builds you, your character. But yeah, he's just relentless in the studio.
You got a book, and your book is called King, Life, Death, and Hip Hop.
Yeah,
And you did a collaboration with Christopher Riley.
yeah.
It's pretty cool doing a book.
It's quite surreal.
It's also it can be a bit confronting too. Like
Yeah, definitely. I know you have like quite a few books out, and yeah, just even the thought of documenting something like that was quite overwhelming. Christopher Riley is he was a writer at GQ, he's at Men's Health now, and he actually approached me first about documenting hip hop in Australia.
Is that the book there?
Yes,
Does it look-
here.
Yeah.
And
That's an old photo, eh?
yeah.
That's cool. That's a cool photo.
Well, that's it. That photo is because we talked about getting a new photo, but that photo
fucking love
is
it.
very special because that is actually in Queanbeyan at an old it used to be called Taylor Park, then it changed to Campese Oval, named after one of
David
the greats,
Campese.
David Campese, and that's in front of the scoreboard. And I spent a lot of years on that oval, and to take that photo there and just represents certain time, it represents the area, represents a lot of my life, and wanted to put that on there. That's photos by Rush. So yeah, that wanted to be.
I love that photo. That's sort of set. That's sort of giving me a bit of attitude, but it sort of says what hip hop's about in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's just it's a mild confidence. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like it's not being too cocky, but it's like I know what I've done. And that's what the book is. My dad's very, very humble man, and he brought me up to be the same. And I've lived like that for a long time. And it wasn't until the later years I realized that being humble in certain spaces can actually be more of a disability than anything. Because you're brought up to not big note yourself and not to rock the boat. And so, you're just quiet there and you just appreciate that you're there, and which I like, but then it's like I feel like you lose out of a lot of things because you're too busy. Like, oh no, I'm not. My wife, she's, my wife Shani, she's been a very big part of my evolution as a person and as I guess a media person as well. And she's like, man, this is not the time to be humble. Like you got to talk your shit, and you got to stand by it. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Come on. And so when Christopher said, let's do your book, I was like, yeah, well, I guess it's, it's time, and obviously it documents a lot of, like, art history of hip hop in Australia. It also documents, a kid growing up in rural New South Wales to Tongan parents and his journey through rugby and religion and relationships and to where I am today. And like I said before, it's about representation for a young Pacifica kid to be like, oh wow, okay, that's what he did and that's how he got there. So
It's not all about being perfect either.
no,
So
it's
this
not
is raw, and it's warts
really
and all.
raw.
It's the whole lot,
Mm.
which is sort of important.
It is, and it's a conversation I said with Christopher. There's a lot of things in there not many people know, but I wanted to put it in there because I didn't put it in there for the sake of being like, oh, check this out. It's more like, no, this is why I am today. This contributed to that. And there is a lot of stuff. Yeah, I gave the book to my mom, and I was like,
Before you publish it?
yeah, it was. I just got the box of the first advanced copies, and I said, "Oh, Mom, it's for you." I wrote a little message, and I said, "Oh, before you read it, just know there might be a few stories in there, might be shocking." And she's like laughing it off. Oh, we all have our stories. And then a week later, she rings up and says, she goes, "Oh, you're just reading the book. Yeah, just I'm just glad I'm finding out about it now and not then, and I'm glad that you survived." It's like, spoiler alert, Mom, your boy's still here. I'm doing all right.
And when did you release this book? How long has it been out for now?
November 1st. So yeah, not too long ago. And yeah, very surreal. And thank you, Christopher Riley. He really kind of pushed me, and it was very very encouraging and very motivating, because a lot of stories in there from like 30 plus years and trying to rethink about things. And
some things we bury too. We try not to remember.
It's interesting because there's a lot of, there was one particular story about a friend that passed away, and I was seeing a healer at the time, and it was a very big session for me, like emotionally. And I didn't mention it to Christopher, but my wife did. And she, "Oh, did Hal tell you about this session he had?" And he's like, "No." And then my wife comes back, "Oh, you didn't mention that." And I was like, "Oh shit." Like, I don't think I purposely buried it. Maybe subconsciously it just happened. So yeah, like you said, it's very raw, and there are a lot of things that people are gonna be like, "Oh shit, okay." Because I think a lot of people only know me from Triple J, and they think, "Oh, it's the radio curator," but
they think they know you.
Yeah, but then there's a whole story of what made me who I am.
Well, writing these books sometimes can be quite healing in itself.
Very, yeah.
Yeah, like it's just putting it down, your life down on pen and paper. It's good for your kids, good for your parents.
Yeah.
It's good for everybody. And all those people are going to read it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll sell really well, particularly amongst all the various communities that you dive into. To me, you're sort of like the Godfather in some respects, in that in the nicest way. I mean, not in the Godfathers in the movie.
Mafioso.
But in that people will talk to you. You're the person in the middle. You're the bridge that say Onefour might talk to get to some other audience, or people like me who aren't really into hip hop, but I know about it, but I'm not really into it. It's not my genre of music, but I'm using you to get to that genre of music. And I find that really important. And I want to congratulate you. 14 years of Triple J, that's fantastic. But where to from here? What's going to happen?
Yeah, a lot of love for Triple J. 14 years, any job, as you know, it's quite astronomical. And I feel very blessed and grateful to be able to have done that. Done a lot, and a lot of opportunities have come from that. So I have a joint venture with Sony Music Australia, a record label, forever ever. I'll be concentrating on the artists there. Obviously the book. Hopefully signing a couple more copies for some readers out there. Working on some TV stuff as well, like co-creating.
Like Australian content?
Yeah, Australian content.
For the streamers, like for Netflix, etc.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
That's very exciting, because that, again, like the book, these are industries that I'm not familiar with, but I'm finding really fascinating and exciting to step into these and being, because usually I step into a hip hop space. I'm the elder statesman.
Yeah.
I know what I know, but stepping into these new spaces, I'm the new guy again, which I love. It's refreshing. So yeah, just a lot of things that I'm excited to take on. Obviously, my family, kids, and wife, but culture, music, like anything that's related to that, I'll be there. And I think I'll be that person to, like you said, be in the middle and reach the wider audience.
I really appreciate you coming in. I'm actually going to go onto YouTube and look at Onefour.
If you need any recommendations, I'm your man.
Totally. And by the way, who's your biggest influence ever, do you think, in hip hop? Growing up
In hip hop?
Yeah.
I would say a group like De La Soul. They, for me, before that, it was very much like very straight. And then De La Soul came out, and they were just more about the creativity. They were sampling different records than other artists were. The way they were saying things, they were just thinking outside of the box. The vinyl came with like a comic strip. Everything about it was so different and very unique and creative and innovative. And yeah, I loved them. And I was very fortunate as a musician to support their group when they played in Canberra. And yeah, De La Soul, like
What period we're talking about?
We're talking, the first one dropped in 88, I believe, and they're still going today. I think that's a great entry point for you.
Yeah.
Don't start at 1-4, that might just scare you away from the whole genre. Like, fuck that. Let's go De La Soul, Tropical Quest, and then we'll take it from there.
Really nice to meet you. Thanks.
Thank you,
much.
Mark. Appreciate you, bro. Thank you.